Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to our Tax Insights series. Today, we're going to be focusing on a crucial filing status that can offer significant tax advantages, qualifying as head of household. Understanding the criteria and the benefits of this status can lead to substantial tax savings, especially for single parents and caregivers. But before we get into our lovely topic of qualifying for head of household, let me introduce myself. So, my name is Shane Harris, and around here on these social media platforms, I'm also referred to as Shane the Negotiator. And I help coaches, consultants, and service providers who are, yikes, overwhelmed and lack guidance to achieve true financial freedom. And I do that by providing expert tax and coaching services. That's what it is that I do. That is who I help. So let's get on in there to talk about this head of household filing status. So, what does head of household even mean? The head of household, or for short, HOH, not to be confused with HOA, Homeowners of Association, status is a tax filing status designed for individuals who are unmarried and provide a home for certain other people like children or dependent relatives. It offers lower tax rates and higher deductions compared to filing as a single or married separately. So let's talk about qualifying for criteria to qualify for a head of household. So to qualify, you have to meet certain criteria. Number one, you have to be unmarried or considered unmarried. So on the last day of the tax year, what was your status? Are you married December 31st, whatever year? Were you married that year? If you were married, you're considered married. If you are unmarried, then you're considered unmarried, obviously. Even if you're separated, you're considered married. So, number two, paid more than half the cost of keeping up a home. So, this includes rent, mortgage, utilities, groceries, and of course, home maintenance and a few other things. Number three, qualifying person lived with you. So for more than half of the year, exceptions apply for parents. So if they live with you for more than half of the year, more than half means 51% or more. 50% is half. So more than is 51% or more. That's number three. So let's talk about a case study before we get deeper into it. So consider we have Jasmine, which is a single mother and owner of a small consulting business. With her two children living with her, she qualified for head of household, HOH. This allowed Jasmine to benefit from a higher standard deduction and, of course, a lower tax rate, providing much needed financial relief. So, financial benefits of HOH, head of household status, is the HOH status can significantly, dramatically reduce your taxable income. It typically offers a higher standard deduction. So, for 2023, it was 20,800 for head of household compared to 2023's single filers, which was 13,850. It also results in a lower tax rate on a given amount of income. So let's get into, I'm going to pull up on the IRS website so you guys can see. Like, I'm not making this stuff up because some things I'm about to share with you is going to shock some people because some of you are taking that head of household status when technically you don't qualify for head of household. So let me find my share my screen here. Let's see, publications 501. That's the one we want. All right, here we are. So here it is, the screen. This is directly from the IRS website, and we're looking at underneath head of household. Okay. So here, head of household, you may be able to file as head of household if you meet all of the following requirements. Number one, again, you are unmarried or considered unmarried on the last day of the year. So on December 31st, 2020, whatever year, we're talking about 2023, What was your what was your status? Were you married or are you single? If you were married on that day, then you likely would not be able to take the head of household status. Of course, there's special circumstances when you may be able to do that, and I'll talk about that in a second. If you are considered unmarried, then you have a dependent, you can potentially take the head of household as a filing status. Number two, you paid more than half the cost of keeping up a home for the year. That's the second. The last one is a qualifying person lived with you in the home for more than half of the year, except for temporary absence like school. However, if the qualifying person is your dependent parent doesn't have to live with you. So let's go through some of this. So if you have a child, your adult children, or they're not adults yet, they're 18, they're adult by the eyes of the law, but for me, they're not an adult, but they're all at school, but you are still responsible for them financially. If you're paying for more than half of their living expenses, you can still claim them as your dependent. And of course, you can still take that head of household status if you are not married. So they're away at school, so they're in college, or they're gone for 2 months and they come back home. You're still providing the support for them. Then you can still take that head of household status. Everybody else, all the other minor children, they have to live with you for more than half of the time of the year. So 51% of the time, they have to have lived with you in that particular year, 6 months or more out of the year, then you can take that head of household status. Now, as it says here, special rules for parents. So many of you are at that stage where you're taking care of a parent. So they may be living on their own, or they may be living in a facility, but you are providing more than half of the cost to care for them. They may still be paying some bills and things, but it's like your college student. They're not paying all those things on their own. You're providing a substantial amount of support for them, more than half. You can still take the head of household status. I know there are many clients of mine who have elderly parents who they are supporting, and they can take that head of household status for that parent. So the parent do not have to live with you, and you can still take that head of household status. Similarly, if your child is away at school, you can still take the head of household um, status, because your child comes home at some point in time. You're still providing 51% or more of taking care of themselves. Now, of course, when your child crosses over, because there are some college students who have jobs and they're taking care of themselves, if they are providing more than 50, if they're providing 51% or more of their own care, they're providing, let's say the cost to take care of them that year was 20,000, and they provided 11,000 of that to take care of themselves, and you provided 9,000. Well, you lost that head of household status, because they you wouldn't qualify anymore, because they are providing more than 50% of taking care of themselves. You would not be able to take that head of household. However, if it was the other way around, out of the 20,000 for the upkeep for your college student that year, you provided 11,000 in supporting them, and they provided 9,000 to support themselves, then of course they can qualify as your dependent, and you can claim them as, you can take that head of household status. Okay, so let's go on down the list here. So here is the worksheet. So keeping up your home. So to qualify for a head of household status, and I'm reading it off of here where it says keeping up a home. To qualify for a head of household status, you must pay more than half of the cost of keeping up a home for that year. You determine whether you paid more than half of the cost of keeping up a home by using the worksheet 1. So here is the worksheet here, cost of keeping up a home. And it has property taxes, mortgage interest expenses, it has rent, it has utility charges, repairs and maintenance, property insurance, food eaten in the home. They're not talking about restaurants and you taking the kids out to eat because it's your time to with the kids or whatnot, that doesn't count. Other household expenses. So here's the worksheet. You come directly to the IRS website, pull up head of household, and the worksheet is available to you. Amount that you paid, and then the total cost. So you write down the total costs for the year and how much you actually contributed. So if you are a couple and you are unmarried and you're in the home and one of you may be able to take the head of household status for the children. So you're unmarried, you have a child, and you're deciding that one of you wants to take the head of household status on the taxes. You have to determine who paid the most. Whoever supported that child 51% or more, and who provided the upkeep of the home of 50% or more, then they are the one who can take that head of household status. So once you guys pull it up on the list and you put the total expenses, and we'll use that same $20,000 to say 20,000. That's not a realistic number, and I'm saying that right now, but we're just using it for this example only. But I know in life, 20,000 for the upkeep of a home for the entire year is likely very much unrealistic. But for this purposes only, we're just using this number. So 20,000 was the fictitious upkeep of the home for the entire year, and you both provided support. However, one of you paid 11,000, the other one paid 9,000, and whoever paid the 11,000, that is the one who can legally take the head of household status. Now, if you guys worked it out and it was an even 50-50 split, there's a tiebreaker somewhere. And I'm not going to get into the tiebreaker, but that's why you have to get with professional, because there'll be tiebreaker rules to determine who gets to take the head of household status. Similarly, here's another example. Times is hard these days, and sometimes you just have to, you gotta live in the same house. So I'm gonna stop sharing this for a second because I don't need the screen anymore. Times is pretty much hard. The cost of living is increasing all over the United States and even in some in other countries. But we're talking about the United States right now. And in certain states, the cost of living is even higher. Even within certain states, they may have certain counties that's even higher. However, you may be living with relatives, you may be living with roommates, whatever. Let's just say you have two sisters deciding to live in the home together. They're unmarried, but they're living home in a house together because they both divorced and they have children. They each have their own sets of children. And they decided to live in a house together because the cost of living is so high, it would be more cost effective to share a home together, which makes sense, right? Reasonable. However, it's time to file taxes. So each family, so we have sister A and then sister B. Each sister has two children each, and they're both supporting for their own families, essentially. They're sharing household bills, the property taxes, the mortgage, the rent, utilities. They're splitting bills 50-50, and they're providing food and things like that. The same applies, even though both of these sisters technically is providing for their own families. Many of you are going to take that head of household status and file. So sister A, some of you are going to go and file your taxes, and you're going to put that you're head of household because you have a dependent. Sister B is going to come and file her taxes also, and she's going to put head of household because she has her own family. She's single and she feels like she's entitled to do so. However, that is not necessarily the case. That would likely be incorrect. Is whomever is providing 51% or more in that household, that is who can take the head of household status, even if you're considered two separate families. Oftentimes in some states, like for New York, I know definitely, California, some of those states that have higher cost of living, and you may live in an apartment or you may live in a house, and there's multiple families in that house. So you have cousins, you have aunts, you have sisters, you have brothers, you got nieces, you got nephews, you got grandkids. The list goes on. It's so many different families live in one particular house. Some cultures, it happens this way. It has nothing to do with cost of living. It's just some cultures, they have all of these different generations in within the household. When it's time to file taxes, all these people may not qualify for head of household status, even if they are taking care of their own individual family. So for instance, let's say I have my mother. We're all, I'm living in a house with my mother, my grandmother. I have a sister who has her own children. I have a brother who has his own children. And let's just say I have an aunt who have their own children. And of course, myself, I work. So everybody works. My grandmother doesn't work. Maybe my mother, maybe she works, maybe she doesn't work. We'll say for this example, she works. So my mother decides she's mainly taking care of my grandmother, and it's, to say it's her house. So she's taking care of my grandmother. I live there also. I'm taking care of myself. I'm providing some support to my grandmother. I'm providing some support to take care of my nieces and nephew. Sometimes they provide some support. However, when it's time for that head of household status, whoever is paying the most. So let's just say my brother lives there and he pays the most for that entire house. He pays most of the mortgage and the rent and all of that. And he decides to take head of household status because he does have children. Then he rightfully can do so. Let's say my mother, on the other hand, she owns the house, but she's not providing all of the support for that entire house. So she would not be able to take that head of household, even though it's her house. So she therefore may not be able to take head of household status, even though she's providing that support for my grandmother or my grandfather, if I had one at that particular time. So you see, it seems a bit complicated, and it's like, oh my gosh, but which one is it? Head of household is of not. The best course of action for this is to get with a professional to determine which one of this status is best for you to file, because you guys have been filing head of household status incorrectly. Some of you are taking head of household status and you are married and you're living in the same house and you thinking that it's okay. So some of the other criteria is for a married couple. So there's an exception. So I remember, as I said, I think it was number 2 when I said, or number 1 when I said you have to be unmarried. So for a married couple, there's some exceptions. So you can be married and still file head of household, but you have to have been separated or living apart from each other for 6 months or more out of the year. So let's just say from January 2023 until May, you guys was somewhat happily married. You was trying to make it work. You were going to counseling and you was doing the thing. At that particular time, you considered you were married and lovey-dovey and everything. You're likely going to file married filing jointly. That's probably what the idea was up until May. Well, June comes and it was like somebody had enough and somebody moved out. So one person stayed home in the home with the kids. The other person moved out and still provides support for the kids. So they moved out in June. So from June through the rest of the year, that's more than 6 months. So they would now be able to file head of household, not both people, one person. So whomever is providing 51% of more support in that household, that's who can take head of household. So even the person that moved out, if they are paying for the upkeep of the home, they're paying the rent, they're paying the mortgage, they're paying the utilities and everything else that is for the upkeep of the home, providing food for the home, for the children in the household, and it's 51%, 50% or more, this person would likely be able to take that head of household status, even if they're in a different residence. However, it could be the other way around. Whomever is the one in the home supporting the children, I have the correction on that. The children did not live with that person. They may not be able to take that head of household status. If the parent who the child is living with, they may be able to take head of household status if they are providing 51% or more. Now, there's a difference between the head of household and dependent credit for like child tax credit and things like that. That's different. So the parent who do not live in the house with the kids, they may be able to file head of household even if they don't claim the child on their tax return as a qualifying dependent. So it can be a little bit different. It's a little bit tricky. So you want to be able to look at all of these situations and get with a professional to see what is going to be beneficial to you and what can work for you. Similarly, the parent who lives in the house with the children may be able to take the head of household status, but they may not be the parent that is claiming the child on their tax returns. So it may be a difference. So consider these things when you are going to file your taxes, and everybody's like, oh, I'm head of household because I have a child. It's not an automatic thing. Having a child does not automatically make your filing status head of household. Okay, that is not how it works. So let's continue on. So common misconception. So there's misconceptions about this status, and I've listed a few. It's not automatically granted to single parents, as I just mentioned. You must meet specific criterias. Also, merely providing financial support to relatives may not qualify you unless they live with you for the required time. So again, I'm going to say that merely providing financial support to relatives may not qualify you unless they live with you for the required time. So again, as I said, if that one parent is providing the financial support to the child, they may not have lived with them, so that may not be able to qualify them as head of household status. So implication for business owners. So for business owners, especially if you're a sole proprietor, qualifying as a head of household can have a significant implications. Lower tax rates and a higher standard deduction can free up more capital for business investments or even for personal needs, for whatever you need it for, the money for. So here's another case study. Let's consider we have Marcus, who's a freelance designer. Marcus is a freelance graphic designer, and he's a single father. Initially, he filed as single, of course, because let's say he just didn't know. So after understanding what head of household criteria means, he realized he qualified due to his son living with him full time. This change drastically can lower his tax bill, benefiting both his personal and, of course, his business finances. So many of you are business owners and you have children. Some of you are single parents. Some of you are separated from your spouse. Sometimes the children are living with you full time. Sometimes they're living with you half time, or so it have to be whichever one is living with you for more than 51%. Usually when you have shared custody, somebody has the children more than the other, even with shared custody. There's some instance where, you're doing every other week. I don't know, every other weekend. The person who's only on getting the every other weekends, you're likely the child doesn't live with you for more than 6 months out of the year for most of the time. They're likely with that parent that's having them Monday to Friday. The weekend parent, you're likely not going to be the one who is likely. It doesn't mean that it can't happen, that the child doesn't live with you for more than 6 months out of the year. It'll likely be the one that has them more times out of the year. So you have to consider all of these things. So everybody's situation is different. One, it may work for one family. It may not work for another family because these criteria matter. So consider that when you see you have a friend of yours and they're able to take head of household status and they're married, and then you are unmarried, but you can't take head of household status. And then you're like, well, why? Because how come they get to do it and I can't get to do it? Or the other way around, because you might not meet those qualifying tests. They may meet the test and you may not. So there's a little bit more. I didn't get into all those tests here, but get with a professional, get with me. My link is going to be available to you so that you can reach out to me to get support on filing your taxes and, of course, figuring out which one of these statuses is going to be for you and which one it may not. So I have the link scrolling across the screen there. Actually, I'm going to use the other one. This is a lot easier to get to. The bit.ly/SD negotiator. That is the link. You click on that and schedule a 15-minute discovery to be able to get assistance with your filing status when you're ready to file. So, in conclusion, qualifying as head of household can offer significant tax benefits. It's important to understand the criteria and evaluate your situation every tax year. So, you might have filed head of household in 2022, but you may not qualify to take the head of household status in 2023. Or you may do it in 20, you might not have qualified in 2023 too, but you may now qualify in 2023. So each year is different. So that's why it's important when you come to file your taxes, even if you've been a client and you've been going to the same tax professional every single year, we still require you to upload the same documents over and over again. And some of you get frustrated. We're like, well, I gave you all this stuff last year. It's the same stuff. Nothing changed. Why do I have to give it to you again? Some things might have changed, and you just something small, like how long you lived with your spouse, how long you did not live with your spouse. That might be the change that you're not paying attention to, and we'll be able to pick that up. And that's why the onboarding process with the questionnaires and the organizers that we give you to complete, that's why you have to fill it out every single year, because a small change like that may not seem that significant to you, but for tax filing purposes, that small change may make or break the situation. Just being one day off can make or break the situation. Okay. So, some teasers for the next topic. So, next time we're going to get into claiming adult children on taxes, implications, and of course, benefits. Whether you're supporting adult children in college or they're at home, this topic is going to be important. So, stay tuned for next week's topic. And if you have not been watching the series on YouTube, go back and check out the playlist. Number one, the playlist that we did last year, Pathway to Financial Mastery, and the new playlist that starts with, if it says 2024. Check out that playlist that we're currently working on right now between now through April. It take us through tax season. Check out those playlists to watch those previous weeks that we have talked about, where over the last two weeks, we've had like about 4 or 5 sessions where we talked about Schedule C's, we talked about home office expense, we have chat about accountable plans, we talked about how to hire, how to interview and find a tax professional, and many other topics that's there that I can't remember all of at this moment. In the Pathway to Financial Mastery, we discussed several on the difference between S Corps, C Corps, LLCs, when to take the S Corp election or the C Corp election, when it's time to upgrade your business. We talked about how mindset mastery, how to shift your mind and thinking. We had a checklist on there. So it's so many different things that resources is available to you in those playlists. So if you're not following me on YouTube, you want to go on over there and do so, and click like and share and subscribe to the channel so that you can get these new notifications and you can watch these videos. And if you're on Facebook and on IG and TikTok and you're catching shorts and you're catching reels, come on and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because the YouTube channel gets all the content. On the other platforms, all of the content is not always available. So again, thank you all so much for joining in today's discussion on head of household status. And if you found this information useful, again, like, subscribe, and share. Knowledgeable filing can make a difference in your taxes. So I'll see you in the next one. And until I come back, I hope you guys